Hello and welcome to Vegan Business Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Fox. My guest today is Mitali Deypurkaystha, a former ghostwriter turned book consultant and publisher who's on a mission to turn vegan experts, business owners, and C-suite executives into authors. Her new book, The Freedom Master Plan, Put Your Mission, Movement and Message on the Map, that's a nice bit of alliteration there, is a practical guide to how to free yourself from selling and chasing clients or investors by writing a high-value business book and, importantly, how to leverage it. Now, the book, which is an Amazon bestseller in several categories, sets out more than 20 proven strategies designed to dramatically increase your referrals, boost your profits, and even build additional income streams. In fact, as a ghostwriter, Mitali wrote 7 business books and generated more than $6.5 million in additional revenue for her clients. Mitali has writing in her blood. Despite not speaking a word of English, by the age of 4, she taught herself to read in school libraries and co-wrote an episode of popular British soap opera Brookside at the age of just 16. She recently renamed her book consulting and publishing company to The Vegan Publisher and offers a training program for anyone who wants to self-publish, as well as an application-only hybrid model of publishing where she works with you and step by step to guide you through writing your book, which is then published under her Let's Tell Your Story imprint. Welcome to the show, Mitali.
Thank you for having me.
So you've got such an interesting backstory, and obviously I know that. And full disclosure, I'm working with Mitali on PR, so I've got to know her story and her history and her talent, etc., quite in depth. So I just want to, before we get into the deep dive into writing and publishing a book, just give us a little bit of of information about you, Mitali. And for example, I know you grew up in Gateshead in the north of England. For a long time, you felt you didn't fit in anywhere. You eventually went down a path of addiction before finding your way back to writing and publishing, and then becoming a ghostwriter for some of the UK's top business leaders. So just expand on that a little, just to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of an insight into you and your fascinating story.
Well, I mean, you kind of said it in a nutshell, really. So yeah, I was born in Gateshead to Indian Bengali immigrants. It was an unusual place to bring me up. I mean, what you tend to find is people of certain ethnicities tend to congregate in certain areas of a foreign country. My dad decided he wasn't going to do that, so he decided to pick the whitest city in the UK and have me there, as he did. So, I mean, now I look back and I realize it's actually a great thing because it allowed me to really understand what it feels like to be an outsider. And so with age comes this understanding of why you've gone through what you went through. But at the time, I wasn't very happy. I was shunned. This was 80s England. So very different world to one now. Racism still exists, sadly, but at least it's more subversive now. Back then, it was out loud and proud, unfortunately. So I had to deal with that. But I also had the issues within my own culture. I was a lot darker than the rest of my family. I basically got heat stroke when I was a baby, and that turned my skin a lot darker than everybody else in my family. So then this whole colorism that we have to deal with. For people who don't know, colorism is basically in Asian and Black communities where lighter skin is deemed better, and the darker you are, then the less attractive you are. And there's this whole, I mean, it's linked with racism, it's linked with colonialism. So yeah, I've always felt like an outsider. And I guess when you find people who do accept you, even though looking back, I now realize they only accepted me because I was doing drugs with them. But at the time, you don't care. Just being accepted by a group of people was good enough. So unfortunately, I started to take amphetamines with a group of kids, they were really at the time. And that led me to losing my place in university. And yeah, I ended up homeless for a while and ended up in a shelter for a while. But hitting rock bottom did me the world of good. It really did. It kind of shook me to my core. The hostel that I was staying in assigned me a great life coach and addiction counselor. It took the best part of a year, but I got myself clean and I ended up going back to university and getting my degree. So it all ended quite well. And yeah, it taught me a lot. It taught me that, you know, as cliche as it sounds, I had to accept myself first before I was seeking validation from other humans. And, you know, it doesn't work that way. First of all, you can't keep everybody happy anyway. And secondly, it doesn't matter even if people do validate you. If you don't validate yourself, it's just not going to work.
That is so true, so true. And I think so many people are still doing that, you know, looking for that, and particularly with the rise of social media, which we were fortunate enough, I think, not to have when we were younger and
Oh
growing
God.
up. It's like the validation of, oh, a like, oh, another like, or, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that's very pertinent to what you've said. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that just kind of sets the scene nicely to just show that no matter, you know, where you've been or what your life journey is, it's possible to turn things around. And here you are, you know, talented writer, publisher, helping to amplify the vegan message and movement, which I think is fantastic. So let's dive into the writing and publishing of a book specifically for business owners, entrepreneurs, experts. So in your book, The Freedom Master Plan, you showcase some of your clients who've leveraged their own books to generate additional income, as we mentioned earlier, at more than $6.5 million. So I'm wondering, could you just tell us about one or two of them and how they did that? Because obviously people can read about that in the book, and we do encourage you to obviously hop onto the freedommasterplan.com to grab a copy of your book. But how, just give us a couple of examples, Mitali, how did a couple of your clients manage to do that?
Well, I think the overall thing with all of the case studies, all of my clients, is they weren't. I say this in the book quite a lot. The book is not the business. And that's when I was interviewing them, which would have been the summer of 2020 when I was interviewing them. That was it. I kind of almost fell off my seat. Metaphorically, I was still on my seat, but I kind of fell off my seat because as a ghostwriter, I had no idea. My job was to write these books, and then my job was done. You know, once they were happy with the book, they paid me, and that was it. So when they started to tell me about the things they did with their book, I had no idea, because my understanding of books is what most people's understanding of books is. Well, you publish it and then hopefully loads of people buy it and you become rich and then you retire and you're happy. And then, you know, as most authors find out, it doesn't work out that way. You know, they're lucky if they sell a few hundred copies in their lifetime, certainly not enough money to really sustain them for even a couple of months, never mind a lifetime. And when I was interviewing them, they were just saying the main thing that kept coming across again and again was they were not even bothered about making money from the books. In most cases, they were even giving their books away. They were using it as a really clever sales and marketing tool. And it was money that they were making in the back end. So getting higher ticket clients, creating, you know, secondary and tertiary income streams, using it to get sponsors, donors, strategic partners. That's where the money comes in. And that's why I'm always very clear, you know, I'm very clear when I say it's $6.5 million of additional business revenue. I never say anyway, oh, well, I've helped my clients, you know, create $6.5 million of book revenue, because it's not from the book. If I actually added up how much they made from the books, I doubt between them they've made more than, I don't know, maybe $20,000, $30,000 between them. And that's not where the money's coming in. So, I mean, let me give you some examples. So I have one client, Aditya, and what she did is she started to use her book to send to organizations. So she's a coach, a life coach, and she started to send her book out to different organizations where she knew her target audience is usually highly strung women in corporate careers. Usually they have a small family, so they're not sleeping much, bless them. They're working and they've got children as well. And she shows them how to bring balance into their lives. So she started to contact a number of these women's entrepreneurial organizations, and she would approach them with, hey, I would like to actually send you a copy of my book. Straight away, that's impressive, because a lot of these organizations get people saying, hey, can I do a half an hour talk at your event? And loads of people are not really giving any other value beyond that. Whereas she came out with, let me send you a copy of my book. So straight away, she's impressing them. It's like, okay, it's a published author. She means
so for free. She was sending them to them for free.
She sent out with a handwritten note and everything. You know, she's the whole charm offensive. And then what ended up happening is she ended up giving a talk to a small group of around 50 women, and she took 50 books and gave them out to these women. That impressed the organizer, the national organizer. She's based in the US. That they said, okay, can you now do this same talk to all of our organization right around the country? So then she went off on a tour of the US where she was going to different states delivering that talk, and she's actually getting high-end clients as well. She was closing at least one client, which is usually worth thousands and thousands of dollars over a year. And she's ingratiating herself with this organization who's seeing her as this valuable ally in what they're trying to do. So that's just one example. And this is, again, it's a perfect example of someone who's not thinking, well, I don't want to lose money on the book. She didn't even think of that. She's just thought, well, it's going to cost me a couple of $100 to print these books out. So what? The return on investment has been huge for her. So yeah, it's that kind of attitude. It's kind of knowing that your book is really a sales and marketing tool. It's there to establish you as an expert, and people treat you as an expert now. Because I think, we've just before been talking about online and how I'm so glad that when I was growing up, there wasn't, any of that influencer culture and Instagram models and that kind of stuff. Because I think it would have really affected my mental health. The other downside of the internet has been that everyone's a flipping expert now, aren't they? You go on Facebook and you've got all these gurus, and you're just like, oh God. Most of them are very good at talking the talk, but we've all experienced it. We've all spent money with various experts who didn't deliver, and that is now a normal experience, sadly. So we all have a healthy amount of cynicism when anyone says they're an expert or anything. Yeah, really, show me. Whereas if someone comes to you with a book, there's this shortcut that happens in the brain. It's sort of like, okay, so you've taken the time and effort and money to create a book. You must know what you're talking about. So it's what sets you apart from everybody else. And that is where the money comes from. I hope I'm making sense.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's great. I really appreciate you giving that concrete example. And because I know, and obviously in the book, there are lots more examples. And as we mentioned, more than 20 different strategies that you can use. But I love that you've shared a really concrete one so that people can start to get a picture of, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because it is counterintuitive. I know as an author myself, like to, go to an event and hand out 50 books free of charge. There is that, like, what? But you make the point, if you can do that rather than making whatever, I don't know, 50 times $20, whatever that is. I'm a words person, not numbers.
Same
but, you get that, even just one client out of, that group that's, as you say, worth thousands over the years, that makes sense. So thank you very much for explaining that, and also explaining, like you did, about the book not being the business. I think that's really important for people to hear, because I think that is a mindset step to get over.
The one little bit I would love to add there is she did that because she researched who the audience is going to be, and she realized it's a very small event. There's only going to be around 50 ladies there. And from conversing with the organizer, she realized that every single one of these ladies were a potential client. So it made sense. So when she does bigger events, more general business owner events, then what she tends to do is she does sell her book, but she sells it at cost. So she makes sure that she's not losing money, because it could be someone who's not really an ideal fit for a business anyway. So she prices it at whatever it costs for her to print. So she doesn't make any money from it, but then she's not losing any money. So it's just about being savvy. And that's what my book is about. I would never expect anybody to read my book and implement every single strategy, because your brain will explode. There's just too many things going on there. It's all about reading it and figuring out the 4, 5, 6, 7 strategies that fits your business and your personality, and using it that way, not using every single strategy, and just being savvy and working like Aditya did. She just kind of worked out, okay, this is where all my core audience is going to be. I'm going to do well by giving my book away to everybody. This event is going to attract 3,000 people who are general business owners. She'll bankrupt herself if she starts giving books out to big events like that. So it's just being tactful, basically.
Nice. I like that. And it's interesting you say like about selling it at cost, or even, with a tiny profit margin, because then you can say on special, which I've done at Veg Fest UK. It's like, a special for this, this event only. So people feel like they're getting value, which they are obviously, but as you said, at the same time you're not losing money. So I love that. So it's about being strategic, which is about what the book is about, which is fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of the different types of publishing. So there's traditional publishing, which I think most people know about, where a publisher covers all the costs. They might pay you in advance, which can be very small or large depending on various things. You get royalties, but they have all the control. And then you've got self-publishing, where it's kind of self-explanatory. You just publish your own book. And I know we've had discussions before where people can just write a rubbish book and upload it directly, an ebook, and upload it to Amazon Kindle, and it gives publishing and writing a bad name. And then there's hybrid publishing. So tell us a bit about what the pros and the cons are of the different types of publishing.
Well, with traditional publishing, I mean, the pros are that someone's paying for your editing and your design and typesetting and formatting and all these wonderful professionals that you need, which unfortunately do cost several $1,000s or pounds to get it right. I mean, you can get it done for a few $100s, but then you see these monstrosities on Amazon, don't you? And you just think that doesn't even look like a proper book. So that's going to do nothing for all those things I talked about, giving you authority and positioning you as an expert. None of that happens if you've got a book that looks like a teenager's just knocked it together over a weekend. So I see those and I just wonder, why did they even bother? They would have been better if they just didn't do it at all. And that can actually have the opposite effect. Instead of building your authority, it can actually damage your reputation as a business owner. So I would say don't even go down that path. So traditional publishing offers that carrot on a stick, I guess. It's like, hey, we'll pay for everything. You don't have to pay for it. The downside of traditional publishing is really that if you are using your book in the way that I advise as a business owner, as an expert, as an entrepreneur, using it as a sales and marketing tool, it's a bit like having this backseat driver that's kind of in your ear telling you what you should be doing. And sometimes, and it's okay so long as your ideas align, but as soon as your ideas don't align, I think of it almost like a marriage. When you get together, you're so in love and you see the world in the same way. 20 years later, you want to throttle them now and you're thinking, and you're wanting two completely different things. That's kind of what it's like being with a traditional publisher. You may have started off on the right path, but a year, 2 years into the relationship, I speak for all business owners, you have to be quite flexible and change with the times. Look at what's happened over the last 2 years with the pandemic. The business owners have done really well, have been able to just pivot and go, okay, let's do something different. Well, guess what? If whatever your pivot was, if that didn't align with what your publisher wanted, they could just go, no, we're not going to do that. It's got nothing to do with us if you want to change the way you want to do things. It is like having a backseat driver who may not always have your best interests at heart because they have a business to run themselves. And they're in the business of making as much money from your book as possible to pay for the fact that they paid for your editing and your design and your formatting and all the rest of it. Whereas your goals is to have a flourishing business. So that's where the issue is with traditional publishing. I will say that if you're writing fiction or a children's book, even then there is an argument for self-publishing, but there's quite a good argument for traditional publishing as well, because at least you have somebody else who takes care of all the professional services for you. But if you're writing a non-fiction how-to, self-help or business book that ties in with what you're already doing, I can't see an argument for traditional publishing because, like I said, it becomes very, very difficult because you've got somebody else now who is in control of what essentially is a marketing tool for you, and yet you could be hindered in using it the way you want to use it. So that's a traditional publishing. Well, self-publishing, I think you've kind of said it in a nutshell. The wonderful thing about self-publishing, I'm a big fan of self-publishing because I love the fact that there's something very egalitarian about self-publishing. Before self-publishing, all the power was with these high and mighty publishers. And, we've now talked about it over the last few years. It's become very obvious. There is unconscious bias that happens with people in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of socioeconomics. And these publishers, not their fault, just how they're made up, are mainly made up of middle class white people, usually men. So guess who the biggest authors were? Pretty much since the dawn of time, they've been middle-aged white men. Even Beatrix Potter had to self-publish her very first book because she was writing at a time where women were deemed unable to write for children, which makes no sense, bearing in mind they're the biggest caregiver. So that made no sense to me whatsoever. So even Beatrix Potter had to self-publish her book. I love self-publishing because it means anybody who now feels that they got a story to say, they've got a message, they've got a mission, go and self-publish. You don't have to sit there and wait for someone who probably doesn't understand you because of your gender or your race or your sexual orientation or whatever it is. You don't have to get the green light now from a heteronormative publisher. You can say what you want to say, but it's a double-edged sword. It does mean that every idiot sadly now goes and self-publishes, and I've seen some horrible monstrosities. I'm sure you've seen them. 35-page wonder, and it's just basically a load of blog posts just been tacked together and published on Amazon, and that person's now calling themselves an author, and you're thinking that's not a real book, so you're not really an author. So the idea of a hybrid publisher is to sit in the middle of that, and that's kind of what I do, in that I allow people to self-publish so they have complete control of their book. It's published on their Amazon account, not my account. So once it's done, I know some other hybrid publishers insist that they publish it. But again, I don't like that, because what they're doing is then they've got you over a barrel. You now, I assume, have to pay them a monthly or quarterly or...
That's what happened with one of Tracy's books. We did that with one of hers in 2013. And like when we wanted to make some changes, they were like, oh, well, we're going to have to do that and we'll charge you a fee. And it was like, yeah, we thought, well, this is our book and we paid to publish it. And yet they were wanting money from us, down the track. So, I hear what you're saying on that.
I've heard loads of hybrid publishers. And again, I don't like that, because it's just the idea that this is a marketing tool for an entrepreneur, an expert, an influencer. Why would I be charging them? I can just show them how to use the account and they can just go in and change things themselves. It shouldn't really be costing them anything to just go and change the price or just change a tiny thing here and there. They should be able to do. If they want to change vast swathes of the book, then they need to come to me and we need to rewrite it, have it redesigned. Of course, there's a fee involved there, but changing bits and pieces, you should be able to do. So what I do is I make sure that all my clients publish their books on their own Amazon account, so they're fully aware of how the KDP system works. And then that's it. They've got their own account. I have no access to it anymore. And they're in complete control. But you're getting somebody who knows how to get a book to professional publishing standards. So my goal is to give you the best of both worlds. You're not kind of running blind a little bit and you end up publishing some monstrosity on Amazon that doesn't do anything for your reputation. Well, actually, it could damage your reputation. And at the same time, just to get that high standard, you're not now tied into a contract with a publisher who's now doing that whole backseat driving thing and telling you what to do with your book.
And you can also choose when to publish. So I know with traditional publishing, you're on their timeline. I know so many authors that have had their books pushed back and pushed back. And if you've particularly got something coming up that you would like, you're banking on your book coming out at a particular time, it's out of your control again. So there's that. So with the hybrid publisher, just to be clear, so people are paying for the services that are involved to produce a book, but they're working in tandem with you and your whole team, and you've got a whole team of vegan editors, proofreaders, indexers, cover designers, formatters, typesetters. So all that is done for them. They're obviously, person has to invest in that, but you're guiding them through every step of the way, and then they're being published under your Let's Tell Your Story imprint, which I think is important for people to know, because even though you've rebranded your umbrella company as the Vegan Publisher, there are many vegan authors that might be writing books that are nothing to do with veganism, and they might not want to be published under the Vegan Publisher imprint, but they've got the option to be published under the Let's Tell Your Story imprint. So that's what hybrid publishing is. It's kind of a bit like self-publishing in that the author is investing, but you're going with a reputable company such as yourself, who is guiding people throughout the process to create a book that is of just as high quality as a traditional publisher. Is that right? Have I got that in a nutshell?
Yeah, you said that beautifully. That's absolutely correct. It's just trying to bridge that gap, because at the moment, without hybrid publishers, it's been being stuck in between a rock and a hard place. It's all like you're either on your own, which is, if you have never had any experience of writing and publishing a book, where on earth do you start? And of course, you're going to make mistakes. You're doing anything the very first time, you're going to make mistakes. And the other option is going to a traditional publisher. And like I said, if you're using, if you've got an event coming up, for example, you want to be, first of all, you want to make sure you're published before then. I've even had some clients have changed their covers specifically for an event, and they made a new cover for an event. Now, if that was with a traditional publisher, most of them would say no, because they would just say, no, that's going to confuse things, And secondly, even if they do say yes, you're on their timeline. So it could be they have a ton of other work, 6 months worth of work, or even a year's worth of work, and you get added on to the end of that queue. And it doesn't matter if you've got something coming up earlier than that. That's not their problem, because they're running on their own timeline. They're running their business. So yeah, that's exactly what hybrid publishing is.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to know the types of services which we've mentioned. So yes, you're writing the book, but then it's got to be edited, and that could be, 2 or 3 rounds of editing. Then there's proofreading, which is slightly different. Like the proofreading is kind of right at the end, where you're really just more picking up just, real kind of like typos or spelling errors. Some books might want an index, not all of them, but some might. And then there's the cover design and not just the front cover, but obviously if you're having, which is highly recommended, a hardback or a paperback, you've got to make sure the ISBN number, which is the specific number for your book, so it can be found by distributors and booksellers, etc. The barcode's got to be in the right place. It's got to be the right size. The text has all got to be nicely formatted, so it doesn't look horrible. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. And so can you give us an idea, Mitali? And I know this is a ballpark figure, but just so people have some idea of, like, if they're watching or listening thinking, yeah, I'm ready, I want to write a book. What if they were to publish through the vegan publisher or through your imprint, Let's Tell Your Story, and work with you in that way? What are some ballpark costs for them to go from beginning to having a published book in their hand?
Well, regarding editing, design, typesetting, I usually assign around about £4,000. Sometimes I don't need to use.
So that's what's that in dollars, US dollars?
Yeah. So gosh, that £4,000. So that would be, what is that, about $4,800, maybe $5,000.
Okay, right.
I always assign that. There's some clients of mine where, the book was quite simple. It didn't have a lot of graphics, not a lot of photos in it or anything like that. It was quite simple language as well. There wasn't a lot of technical language that the editor had to really make sure it's correct and go and do some research. It all depends on what you're writing about, how long it is, and how many graphics and infographics and photos and that kind of thing that you're using. I have been able to publish some people under $3,000. And then there's been some people who've really been pushing it over $5,000. So it really just depends. But that's kind of the main thing to remember, is you're looking in thousands and not hundreds. I always worry when people say, oh, I've had a quote and, they can do everything for $800. I'm going, oh, I'm sorry, they're doing, what are they doing? They're editing, they're designing, they're typesetting, they're formatting, they're doing everything for it. It's just not possible. And then I worry about the quality of what's being created. What I would say is, if you're now sat there thinking, I don't have that kind of money, what I would say, rather than going to these really cheap providers where you're probably not going to get what you really want, is look at other ways that you can get your book out in a way that may not be as great as a major publisher, but it's good enough. So, for example, I've got a program where it's just a package of 34 different nonfiction book covers, and then you can just choose one. They're Photoshop files, and then they're already laid out, so you can just go in and just change it to your book title. And I wouldn't really mess around with it, because then again, you're messing with the design. It's like, my designers have created this, so they understand things like negative space and stuff that really blows my mind, because I'm not a person like that. I'm a word person. That's why I'm a book consultant. So I don't really understand how it works, but they've designed these covers so that you can literally go in and you can change the colors a little bit, but don't change it too much, because it's already been designed. And then that is so much better than paying someone maybe $200 to create a cover design, and it's terrible, So I would say there are ways around it. You're using one of those covers, it's not going to be exactly your cover. I'm a big believer that your cover should reflect you. I mean, my cover was created from scratch, and it was something that I did in conjunction with my designer, with one of my designers, and it was such a lovely process because I just came to it thinking, what does the word freedom to me? And then I realized freedom means to me sky, and I could just visualize sky and clouds, and then she decided to add in the aeroplanes. I don't know where that came from, but I just loved it. I was like, paper aeroplanes. I don't know why I didn't think of that. So it's such a lovely process because the cover is mine. It's my cover. You won't get that with one of these templates because they're already pre-designed. But even that is better than some terrible designer that you haven't vetted, who's quoting you, a silly low figure. So I would say, think in terms of thousands of dollars, somewhere between at the lowest end around $2,500, $3,000 up to $5,000. But if you're thinking, oh my God, I can't do that, come and speak to me. I do have things in place for people who can't afford that. And like I said, it won't be exactly what you want, but it'll be better than going with a cheap designer or a cheap typesetter who can or a cheap editor. I mean, I will say I've seen some people who've worked with editors, and I've looked at the manuscript and I just thought, honestly, it would have been better for you just to get a month's subscription of Grammarly. It would have done better than that. And I always say that. I'll say if you can't afford an editor, go to Grammarly. I think it's about $30 for a month. Get the pro version of Grammarly for a month or two, and use that. Even that is better than a cheap editor who doesn't really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So there is software and there are templates and things you can use if you can't afford to have the whole bespoke package, having a designer and a typesetter and an editor. There are ways around it.
Got it. I love that. I love that you offer those different options. I think that shows the benefits of working with someone like you and you can get it done quicker as well, because you've got all that guidance from you. You've got the professionals in place, and you keeping everybody on track, including the author. Whereas, stumbling around in the dark, like you said, you're bound to make mistakes. But it's good that there are different options that you do, including your training package as well for people who decide, no, you know what, I do want to self-publish, but I don't want to have to spend ages trying to figure out how to do that. They can go through your program as well. So I love that you've got those different options as well as the bespoke packages. And it is an investment. Like you said, this is not just a book that you publish and, show your family and then have loads of copies sitting in your garage or, on your coffee table just for vanity. Like, it is an investment in marketing. So if you're going to invest in, social media ads or, any other form of paid marketing, this is an investment. And we've already seen from your example that you gave of the woman you spoke of earlier, who, reaped that back probably 100-fold, 1,000-fold of her initial investment. So I think
she's doing incredible now. Yeah. It's just incredible what she's doing. And it's affected everything in her business now. She's now seen as a keynote speaker. So she's now no longer just a life coach, she's a keynote speaker. So guess what that means? That means she should actually charge more as a life coach as well. So everything raises up, and yeah, it is all about being clever with it and being strategic with it. That's the word that you use, being strategic with your book.
Yeah, really very different kind of book. Yeah, and it's obviously a value for people. People are going to get great value like they do from the Freedom Master Plan. They're going to get great value, but it is, as you say, it's a sales and marketing tool. And I know there's maybe some people who are watching and listening who maybe are already authors or they've been published by traditional authors who are cringing, at the idea of a book. This shouldn't be, it should be something to read with pleasure, and it's not a sales and marketing tool. But look, it is what it is. This is a particular type of book. If it's not the type of book you want to write, that's great, but it is something helpful, I think, for particularly our audience on Vegan Business Talk, which is vegan business owners, entrepreneurs, creatives, experts, influencers, etc. It makes sense to write a book that is going to bring you joy. Of course, you're going to your target audience, whoever they are, and that's going to help to boost your business, because that's a win all around, because we want more vegan authors spreading whatever messages they're spreading to make the world a better place. So I love that. So look, I want to end, Mitali, with we've talked about how important it is to write a book, the different ways that you can publish, ways to work with you, and how to leverage a book. But I know there's going to be people going, oh, this sounds great. I would really love to write a book, but I can't write. I am not a writer. How do I do this? Now, I know you offer ghostwriting services, which is slightly different, where someone will write under your name. But for those who, maybe either can't afford or don't want that package, they want to kind of have a go, but they're not confident in their writing. Can you give us, and I know there's a bonus chapter in the Freedom Master Plan on how to write a book. Can you give us maybe 1 or 2 tips on a particular tip or strategy for someone who doesn't consider themselves a writer on how they can write a book?
Okay, well, the first thing is stop panicking. There's something that happens to a lot of people as soon as the idea of writing a book. I've seen some very capable people, quite impressive people, suddenly come down with, a dose of imposter syndrome at the thought of writing a book. And I always say, well, especially as a vegan or ethical or plant-based entrepreneur, if you think about it, a lot of what you're doing in your marketing is educating anyway. Think about, the blog posts that you write and the LinkedIn posts that you write. I bet a lot of it is you're educating people on the fact that what they're doing, things that they're buying are actually causing torture to animals, or it's not sustainable for the planet, and why your option is better. A lot of your sales is coming from educating. All a book is just doing that on a bigger scale. So it's really just distilling all of that knowledge and expertise into a book. So I found that whenever I'm talking to my clients and I put it in that way, I can almost visibly see their shoulders sink a little and go, oh, that makes me feel more relaxed. It's not, because I think there's this belief you have to birth this brand new thing, and that can feel daunting. And it's like, I'm not asking you to be the next J.K. Rowling and come out with the 7th Harry Potter book. It's not this new thing. It's what you're already doing, and you're doing it. You're educating people. You're just going to do that on a bit of a grander scale. That's literally all you're doing. So then they go, oh, well, I know everything there is to know about my business and my products. Like, well, that's it. That's all you're doing, is talking about that. The second tip I would say is start mind mapping. I'm amazed how many people still don't really use mind maps. I use them not just for books. I use mind mapping for my business. I use it for my social media planning. It's a really great way of, I don't know why, I think we've been taught from a very early age to make lists. So whenever you have to-do lists, the problem with lists are that's not how the human brain works. The human brain doesn't make lists. It's just not how it works. If you ever look at our brain through a brain scan, you'll see that whenever I'm in thoughts, we have like these synapses just flash off everywhere. That's kind of what a mind map is doing. So when you have ideas, you can just put the idea in and you can move that idea along to fit in with something else that you put in there later. And it's just more flexible. When you start creating mind maps, it really helps. So what I would say is don't torture yourself with, oh my God, I need to write this book today. Instead, just build a mind map. So whenever you're doing anything in your business, perhaps you've got a great client and you had a great conversation and you go, that needs to go into my book. Open your mind map, put in a few bits that you want to put in, forget about it now and just leave it. And then when you come back to something else that's really interesting, it's like, that needs to go into my book. Go back into your mind map, add it in, see where it needs adding on in relation to whatever else you've got there, and then leave it alone, come back. You do that for a few months, and the thing is, you'll have most of what needs to go into your book without you even realizing. And it's such a stress-free way to bring a book together. You're not forcing yourself to write from, I think a lot of people want to write a book in the same way they read a book, which is beginning, middle, and end. Whereas I teach my clients that no, you don't have to write it or even plan it in sequence. You're just going to mind map everything out. Whenever things come to you, you just put them in, and then we will look at it as a whole and see if we can start making some sort of cohesive sense out of it. And then it starts to build together. The final thing, I know you said 2 things.
I love that. Just before we go on to the final thing, just for people who don't know, so a mind map is basically a visual representation, and you can do it handwritten, like I did for my book. I did mine on a great big, like an art pad, and you just literally, because I can't draw to save my life, you can literally like draw a color, get some color crayons, you draw a colored circle, and you might write in the central idea of your book, and then you just kind of draw these different branches and just write in what they are. And like you said, they kind of end up looking like a map of your brain with these little synapses following coming out of them. And you can get software for it if you're someone who likes to do it online. You can get either online mind mapping or just literally do it by hand. So if you just Google mind mapping, but it's just a very simple visual representation of your ideas. But okay, final step.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, the software that I like using is mind42.com, and it's free. So it's mind and then the numbers 42.com. It's very simple. So if you're really wanting like a snazzy mind mapping software that has colors and galore, and it won't have that, it's a free software. So if you need that, you'll need to pay for something. But it works for me and my clients, and we are able to create these really huge mind maps of 350, 400 plus points on there. Everything that needs to go into the book goes into the mind map. And it's just a fantastic way of planning. I use it for my social media as well. Like if I get an idea, I stick it on my social media mind map, and then I can come back to it later and create a post around it. So it works really, really well. The final thing I was going to say is one thing that really seems to stop a lot of people is they start getting overwhelmed with the whole book idea, and they start to think, I don't know how to structure a book. I was terrible at English when I was at school. My English teacher used to shout at me because my grammar was terrible. I would say, that's not your wheelhouse. Stop worrying about things that are not your wheelhouse. Your wheelhouse is you're the expert at what you do. And especially as a vegan, plant-based, ethical entrepreneur, you have a duty to get your message out there in as big a way as feasibly possible, so we can start getting to that vegan normal world that we all keep dreaming about. So that is what you should be concentrating on. Everything else, all the other stuff, is stuff that a good book consultant, a good editor, a good designer, that is their wheelhouse, that's our job. And I always tell my clients, why are you worrying about things that's not for you to worry about? I need to worry about structure. I need to worry about your grammar. That's a great editor will sort that out. Your only job is to just download your expertise, of which you are an expert of, otherwise you wouldn't even have a business. Just downloading that into a manuscript. That's the only thing you should be concentrating on. How are you going to give value to that reader so you move them from A to B? That's all you
I love that. And I guess one tip as well would be, if you really can't stand the idea of writing or typing, is to actually speak, record your thoughts and your ideas. And then you can whack it through a transcription, through Otter or something, and then you've got it. So if you really I just can't write, but I do want to have a book, you can literally just speak. You've got phones now, if you're wherever you are, and you get an idea, of course you can add it to your mind map, but you can also just speak it. And then, as you say, Mitali, the people are working with you, your team of experts does all the rest. So I hope that allays people's
you
mind.
said that, because my clients use Otter, and that works nicely with the mind map, because it's really difficult to dictate if you don't know what you're dictating. There's a lot of and it becomes difficult. Whereas if you have a mind map, you kind of know what you need to say. So the dictation process works because of the mind mapping process. So they kind of work together.
Yeah. So I hope that allays people's fears. So if they're thinking, yeah, I really would love to have my own book, but I just can't write, I hope that's allayed your fears, that it is perfectly possible to write a high quality book and have a high quality professional published book, within 6 months, if that's what you want. And obviously by working with Mitali, that really helps the process, because you're guided every single step of the way. I think that's been super helpful. I hope that's inspired a lot of vegan business owners and entrepreneurs to become authors and to use and leverage their book as a sales tool while spreading their message out into the world. So Mitali, it's been wonderful speaking with you. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with before we wrap up?
Final thought is just, I think I've already said it. Don't be overwhelmed. I think I always say writing a book feels like this huge mountain that you have to climb. And what you're doing is you're concentrating on the summit. And if all you're doing is concentrating on the summit, then of course you're going to get overwhelmed, because you're right at the bottom right now. And I will say, instead, just concentrate on doing one thing at a time. Just look down at your feet and put one foot in front of the other. stop thinking about the summit and just literally like, right, I need to plan this out of my chapter. I need to do this. They just literally put one step in front of the other. And the next thing you know, you're at the top of the mountain. You didn't even realize. A lot of my clients do that, after 3 months, they're like, oh my God, my book is finished. How on earth did that happen? Because they weren't even looking at the end. They were just trusting the process and just doing the work. And if you just concentrate on the day-to-day, whether it's an hour a day that you put into your book, or whether you assign, I don't know, half a day on a Friday and that's your book day, just concentrate on just getting that little thing done and forget the rest of it. And it will all come together.
I love that you mentioned that people can do that time-wise, whether it's, if you want write every single day for an hour or half an hour, or you allocate a day or a half day a week. So I think that's super helpful, particularly for people who are running their own businesses, who are busy. It's like, yes, wouldn't it be lovely if we could all just go off to a writer's retreat for 6 months and come out with our book? But that's not practical for,
No.
Particularly for experts and entrepreneurs. So I love that you can do that quite realistically and sustainably. And yes, of course, it's going to take, work, etc. But you can still do that sustainably while still running your vegan business. Mitali, it's been wonderful speaking with you. So people do head over to thefreedommasterplan.com, where you can find out how to buy Mitali's book. And you can, wherever you buy it, you can then go back to the Freedom Master Plan, put in the receipt for your book, and Mitali's got a whole load of free bonuses you can get simply for buying the book. So that's a no-brainer. So make sure you grab your copy, paperback or Kindle, at thefreedommasterplan.com. And you can find out about Mitali's services, including her self-study expert program, at theveganpublisher.com. If you are watching this episode, you'll see those links scrolling along the bottom of the screen. And if you're listening to the audio version of this episode, those links will all be in the show notes page. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, Mitali. Thanks so much for joining me. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Bye for now.